How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Gear Vault podcast. I'm your host, Wes Robinson, and in today's show, we have the 180 degree opposite of the last show. So, in the last show, I asked ChatGPT what the most overrated cartridges for hunting were, for like a top 10 list, and we went through those and talked about those. So naturally, I'm going to do the top 10 underrated list according to AI. So going to be a lot of fun. We'll got a lot to talk about here, and as always, don't be afraid to jump in the comment section and let me know your thoughts on what should have been on this list and what should definitely not have made it on this list. Number 10, the 7 by 57 Mauser. Why it's underrated. Century old design, often dismissed as obsolete. Reality, extremely efficient, inherently accurate, and capable of taking anything up to elk with the right load. Ideal for traditionalists and hunters who appreciate low recoil and high performance. So, this is one that I don't have a lot of experience with. I know a lot of people that do absolutely love the 7x57. I think European, if I'm not mistaken, the European market, definitely a lot more love for 7x57 over there, which it would make sense that that would be the case. But I mean, ballistically, I think that's what's more than a 708, but what less than 7 rim mag, I suppose. I'm not sure where it falls in as far as like with like 280 Remington. It might be very similar, but let me know what your thoughts are on the 7x57. Number 9, the 264 Win Mag. Says why it's underrated. An early barrel burner. Wait. Oh, I see. Okay, so it's saying it's underrated because an early barrel burner reputation doomed it from the start, essentially. I'm not sure if that's the case. I wasn't around when 264 came out, but I do remember, or I do know of people saying that back then that they talked about it being a barrel burner. If you know me, you know that I'm not one of those people that really cares about burning barrels because I don't shoot enough to burn barrels really that often. It says the reality is with modern barrels and powders, it's a long range dream that rivals the 6.5 PRC but with retro style. Ideal for Western hunters and long range shooters who like something different. I can see that. I also don't agree though that it would be like on the underrated list if it just rivals 6.5 PRC, because unless it's going to smoke 6.5 PRC, then why wouldn't you just go with that? Because that's what's going to have all the ammo that you can, buy off the shelf. You're not going to go to your local store and find a bunch of 264 Win Mag, unfortunately. But there is going to be a lot of 6.5 PRC. So, in my opinion, I would probably take the PRC at this day and age, unless you, again, like AI said, unless you're someone that just wants to be different. And there's nothing wrong with that. Number 8. So keep in mind, I probably should run through these lists and like gather my thoughts and think about what I want to say about each one. But the other part of me is like, I would rather just have my natural reaction to whatever it says. And number 8 is 6mm Remington. Why it's underrated. It lost to the 243 in popularity wars. That doesn't make it underrated. Reality. Better case design, more velocity, excellent accuracy. It's the connoisseur's varmint and deer cartridge. Ideal for varmints, antelope, whitetail, and even coyotes. Okay, we got to keep in mind that AI is not perfect, right? It's basically just taking all the information on the internet, compiling it, and spitting it back out really fast. And we obviously know that everything on the internet isn't true, or not everything on the internet is true, I should say. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that one. I guess I don't really have a lot to say on that. It doesn't seem like that's accurate to me, but maybe. But number 7, I do have some thoughts on. Number 7 is the 35 Whalen. It's underrated because it's an old school powerhouse that never got modern marketing love. The reality, it's a 30-06 case necked up to 35 caliber, Hits like a hammer on elk, moose, or bear with manageable recoil. Ideal for thick country and big game at modern ranges. This one, I would say, not only do I agree that the 35 Whalen should be on this list, I would actually probably put it higher than number 7. I would maybe put it number 4 or something like that. 35 Whalen is an excellent cartridge. My experience with it has been super positive. Recoil hasn't been awful. I mean, it's definitely kicks, but it's nothing, no more than like 7 PRC or Win Mag. I mean, it's just, I feel like at that level, they all kind of feel the same. 35 Whalen, you can shoot it, no problem. The biggest problem with the 35s is the bullet selection. You don't have a lot of great bullet options. You got a few that are good, but you just don't have a lot of options, I guess I should say. But for most hunters, people is going to be shooting 400 yards and under. 35 Whalen is a super good choice. If you are a person that lives in Iowa and your state regulations allow your straight wall cartridge to be a bottleneck if it's 35 caliber or larger, I would own a 35 Whalen without hesitation. 35 Whalen's just cool. Again, just not enough ammo options out there, not enough bullet options out there for you. Speaking of bullet and ammunition options, number 6 is the 6.8 Western. Now, 6.8 Western is one that I have a little experience with. And the experience I had was super polarizing because I love everything about it other than the options that you have for ammunition up until recently. But, I've never had good experiences with Browning or Winchester ammo. I just haven't. It's been super inconsistent and just not that great. And as someone who understands that one of, if not the most important parts to the whole hunting puzzle is the actual projectile, whether that's a broadhead or a bullet, that thing has to do its job after hitting the spot that you need it to hit. That's as simple as it is. And 6.8 Western was just not a lot of options that were great. There were some good bullets like Akibon long range, good bullet. Accuracy that I had with it was honestly not that great. Same with like the Tip Game King. It's a good bullet, but I don't know. I couldn't find anything that shot the factory 6.8 Western ammunition that great. And I was shooting it out of Brownings, but now we have Barnes who just released their reserve line that offers a 155 LRX, and that was super exciting. Made me kind of wish I hadn't have sold my 6.8 Western, but let's see what ChatGPT says about 6.8 Western. Why it's underrated. A new cartridge that got overshadowed by the PRC hype. The reality, excellent BC bullets, magnum performance in a short action, and ideal for elk and mule deer. Ideal for Western hunters who want modern ballistics without going overboard. And I agree with all of that. So, like, in my opinion, like if you're someone who wants or who likes like the 7mm bullets, that your 160s, 170s, 175s, you can get all of that in the 6.8, like just better BCs. So like the same bullet in a 6.8 that weighs 175 versus the same bullet in a 7 that weighs 175, your 6.8 is going to have higher ballistic coefficient. And that case design is honestly super impressive. So you had, a short action, short fat, but near 3,000 feet per second, or like over 29 with some of those like 165, 175 grain bullets. Super impressive from a short action. And honestly, I wish that the 7 PRC was a 6.5 PRC necked up to 7. That would have made me happier. It is what it is, but I like that short action cartridge idea. And I think 6.8 Western, like I said, for the bullet weights that you can get in that cartridge, the case size dimension, the short action, it's magnum level performance. Doesn't kick that bad. It kicks worse than a PRC, than a 6.5 PRC rather. But it's not bad at all. And to me, it was the only thing that kept it from being one of the greatest newer releases was the ammunition. And this says that it's underrated because it got overshadowed by the PRC hype. I don't think that's the case. I think that what happened was they released the 6.8 Western right around COVID, and no one had any ammunition, and no one could make any ammunition, and the people that could were making 308, 30-06, 223 because that was where the shortage was. That's where the demand was, and like everyone just had so much other things on their mind besides trying out this new cartridge. It was like the worst timing in history, in my opinion. I think that it's one of those situations where if it would have came out, like if it came out today, it would be wildly more popular than it did or than it was when it came out originally. The other thing about 6.8 Western is, I think that now that we got Barnes making ammunition for it, I'm hoping that is the push that we need to get a few other people making it. If that happens, I'm definitely gonna jump back on the 6.8 Western train and try that out again. All right, y'all, we're halfway through the list. Appreciate you listening so far. Let me know what you think. So far, I would say 6.8 Western and 35 Wayland are definitely the two that should be on here. 264 Win Mag, 6mm Remington, even 7 Mauser. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily call them underrated, but let's move into the top 5. Number 5, 30-30 Winchester. Why it's underrated? Because people call it old-fashioned. The reality is within 200 yards, it's still as deadly as anything ever made for deer. Lever gun magic. Ideal for woods hunters, brush country, and traditionalists who know shot placement matters most. I actually have never shot anything with a 30-30, and that's, I guess, kind of odd considering I did grow up in eastern Kentucky, and I feel like there were a lot of people that used 30-30 lever guns there. It just never was something that I did. I took one time, and it was super foggy. I seen a deer right at daylight, and it was dark, and I went home and I couldn't see the deer, open sights. I told my dad, I was like, I think if I'd have had a scope, I could have shot that deer. And so the next day he sent me out with a scoped weapon, and it was a muzzleloader. And that's a story for a different day, but I did kill a deer. 30-30, it says within 200 yards, still as deadly as anything ever made for deer. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's the case. When you're talking deer-sized game, especially under 200 yards, there's so many cartridges that will work perfectly fine for that. It's ridiculous. It really is more, like the bullet that you select is way more important. And as you get in that like 100 to 200 yard range, like even the bullet selection doesn't matter that much. I mean, most things are at that distance are going slow enough that they're not going to explode. But they're still going fast enough that they're going to expand. So the amount of cartridges that you could, use with success on deer-sized game at a couple hundred yards it would be an insane amount of cartridges. I don't know the number, but it would be a lot. So whether it's underrated, I don't know. I mean, I think this day and age, it's just there's really no place for it, in my opinion. Again, if you're a traditionalist, by all means, go for it. But I don't think, when I think of underrated, I think of like cartridges that are offering something that others aren't and people don't know about it. And I don't think that this one checks any of those boxes in my mind. But the next one does. Number 4 is the 7mm 08 Remington. So this is one that I think people get caught up in distance and energy and feet per second and marketing, and that's why you have 7 PRC being like one of the best selling cartridges out there right now. The reality is people don't need that. Most people don't need that. And when I say most, I mean most. Most people will not ever need the full potential of a 7mm PRC. They just won't. But a 7mm 08 Remington now, that is something that it really checks a lot of boxes from 0 to 400 yards. It really does. And I'm a firm believer that most shots across the board are going to be probably 400 yards or less. And that's not just coming from my own experience. That's listening to every other person that I've ever met talk about shot distance. If you really listen to them, most aren't shooting stuff much past that. Some are going out to 600, but very, very, very few people are actually hunting past 400 yards, even with the modern, technologies and stuff that we have with cartridges and optics these days. But 7mm Remington is one that, in my mind, checks a ton of boxes. Especially when you're talking like a 140 grain TSX, 140 grain Accubon. Like that is very much a do everything kind of setup, from varmints to pronghorn to whitetail up to elk and moose. Most recent experience was my wife's elk in North Dakota here, 140 grain TSX at was 120 yards, I think, and basically shot not lengthways through it, but somewhere between broadside and lengthways. I mean, it went in quartering to and came out in front of the rear hip, dead within 3 steps. I mean, I don't know what else you would have wanted in that scenario. I've seen elk hit with a lot bigger, a lot faster cartridges and bullets and not die like that. So that was a situation that kind of just confirmed and just made me think, that there really isn't a lot of need for much more than that. It's just people just get caught up in the marketing, and they think they got to have the latest and greatest. And here I am making videos on 7mm backcountry, right? So I get it. But if we're talking honestly, 708, 308, it's about all you need. Whoa. Again, not reading through this list ahead of time, but number 3 is the 308 Winchester. That's pretty funny. Why it's underrated. It's been around so long that people call it boring. The reality is it's efficient, accurate, has mild recoil, and incredibly versatile from hogs to elk. Still one of the most practical all-around hunting cartridges ever made. It's ideal for almost anything in North America inside of 500 yards. Yeah, that's true. It really is great. The one of my favorite things about 308 is ammo availability. I've always liked 308 and 30-06, but back in through the COVID eras and through those years of 2020 to 22, probably, man, go into a gun store or any store that sells ammunition, and it's like, what could you buy? 308, 30-06, maybe some 22. Kind of really shows you what you already knew, but it kind of confirms it. It's like, man, this stuff is around. It's going to be around. There's a lot of people that shoot it because, if that's what the ammunition companies were producing, that means that is probably their best seller. And again, you've still seen some Creedmoor and stuff like that. So the logic tracks, they're going to produce their bread and butter, in those situations. And it would appear that around the country, people are using the heck out of 308 Winchester and 30-06. But my experience with 308 is that it's been as much as you need for most things. It really is. Shot an antelope at basically 400 yards, and that was with a 16-inch 308. No problem. Dead right there. Shot a 300-pound black bear at 20 yards. Exited. Dead within 15 steps. Countless deer. I've never shot an elk or anything like that with a 308, but my experience with everything else has been super, super solid. And it's one of those things that it comes down to how fast your bullet is going when it impacts and what that bullet does within that speed range. So you take like a Barnes bullet that's going, 2,000 feet per second. If you hit something at 2,000 feet per second, it's going to do its job. Now, a 300 Win Mag will extend that distance that's going to happen. But is it necessary? Most often, no, it's not. So, my opinion, 308 is literally the most versatile. 30-06 would be close, but I think 308 is probably, if I had to use one cartridge for the rest of my life, that's what it would be. Number 2 is one that I don't, unfortunately, have a lot of experience with, but it is the 257 Weatherby Magnum. And ChatGPT says it's often dismissed as too fast or a barrel burner. The reality is it's one of the flattest shooting cartridges ever made and absolutely deadly on deer and antelope. Ideal for Western hunters who like to stretch the distance on open country game. I can definitely see that. I've seen a lot of deer killed with like 25-06 and stuff like that, and that 25 caliber does seem to do a good job. So I can imagine that, given that your bullet is strong enough as far as construction that it doesn't break apart too quick, I'd say 257 is probably super good. I think that, nowadays with the release of the 25 Creedmoor, I think that that's going to be where like the future of 25 cals is going. It's going to be longer, sleeker bullets. And that being said, maybe we will see like a 25 backcountry, with peak alloy technology where they're getting 257 Weatherby velocities from like a 25 Creedmoor type case. I don't know, but I don't have a lot of experience with the 257 Weatherby or any Weatherby for that matter. So y'all will have to let me know in the comment section if that one deserves to be on this list or not. But let's get to number 1. And honestly, I think that this one is one that a lot of people will probably agree with. But I don't know, maybe not. Number 1 is going to be the 280 Ackley Improved. And I have experience with 280 Remington. I don't actually have experience with the Ackley Improved version. From what I can tell, it's one of the, so there's a lot of Ackley Improved cartridges out there, right? And a lot of them, don't really gain you a lot, and some of them gain you quite a bit. And from what I can read and tell, it seems like 280 is one of those that the Ackley improvement actually gained you quite a bit, as much as 100 and some feet per second, which is a lot, by just changing the shape of something. That's pretty cool. ChatGPT says it's underrated because it sits between the 270 and 7 Rim Mag, but somehow gets ignored. The reality is it has nearly Magnum level performance with less recoil, superb efficiency, and great long-range ballistics. Ideal for deer, elk, and mountain game. It's the thinking man's 7mm. Is that, because that's in quotes, the thinking man's 7mm. So that makes me think that somewhere on the internet someone said that. That sounds like that sounds like a Joseph von Benedict thing. That sounds like something he would say. Maybe Spomer. I don't know. Doesn't matter. But in any case, I do see the I do see like the pros of the 280 Ackley for size. Like that was something that I like about like the 7 backcountry, which is really darn similar like size wise as far as the case dimensions. I like being able to have an extra round in the magazine versus like a PRC. I don't think that I like short actions, but a standard long action I like better than like a Magnum action. Obviously, so like as far as length, it's not too much. The 280 experience that I have in my past has been really good, and it's just a function of how fast a 7mm bullet is hitting the game, right? That's really all it is. But I think that for most people, 280 or 280 Ackley, either one is a really good option. And nowadays, probably 280 Ackley, you're going to have actually more ammunition availability versus a standard 280 Remington. But I think that if you're the kind of person that likes flat trajectories and Western hunting and stuff like that, it would probably be a pretty good option. Again, for me as a do it all, do everything type of a cartridge, I kind of tend to like more of the 308 30-06, pushing like 160, 180 type bullets. But I certainly couldn't knock a guy for wanting to go with the 280, running like 150, 155s or something like that. I think it would be a super good option. And honestly, I do think that it deserves to be on this list as, top underrated hunting cartridges, because if you like the 7PRC, there's no reason you wouldn't like the 280 Ackley, because especially with like the Hornady powders not getting you the velocity that they used to, a 280 Ackley is not far off from the performance of the 7PRC, and it's definitely less recoil. The biggest thing, the biggest difference is the bullet size. You can get some heavier bullets for your PRC off the shelf, but other than that, 280 Ackley is a heck of a good choice. So, yeah, that's the list according to ChatGPT. They also threw in some honorable mentions down here. So, bonus mentions were the 300 H&H, 338 Federal, 284 Winchester, and 6.5 by 55. Out of that list, I would say the 338 Federal should have been on there, and I would probably put that one maybe number 3. I think 338 Federal is one that just flat out came out at the wrong time. If it was released today, it would be way more popular. And you actually have good 338 bullets, not like 358 Winchester is one of my favorites, but again, not a lot of options in the 35 caliber. So 338 Federal, I wish that would get re-released in like the backcountry or something like that line. That would be sweet. But guys, let me know in the comment section what you thought about this list from AI. They nail it or they absolutely get it wrong. What would you add to the list and what needs to be taken off of this list? If you're listening to this, I appreciate the support. If you're watching on Spotify or YouTube, thanks. I appreciate it. It's been fun so far, and trying to keep videos coming out and keep podcast episodes coming out while also balancing the craziness that is fall for a hunter and outdoorsman. So appreciate you sticking around. Till next time, y'all be safe.